So imagine for a minute you become the caretaker of the Mona Lisa, right? And then one morning, after half a case of light beer, breakfast, you look at her timeless, enigmatic smile and you say to yourself, you know what this broad needs? A big honking old set of titties and a bikini. So you take an X-Acto knife and you cut her face out and you glue it over an old poster of Pamela Anderson, and you call that good. That's pretty much what happened to one of the most, the rarest complete Chrysler engine of all time, the missing link, the engine that was supposed to replace both the Hemi and the wedge motor, and we'll get to that in a minute. Actually, my history with this engine goes back to 1986 in this issue of High Performance Mopar. This is actually a pretty neat issue. In this one here, we did an article. We found the two of the four-door Hemi cars. The other two, the one in Canada and the one in Sweden, weren't known about yet. But we found these two, and they were both, believe it or not, they were in Wichita, Kansas. But anyway, that's not what this is about. This is about this. The Hemi that never was, the Ball Stud Hemi. And I did this story. The editor of this magazine had a habit of taking my byline off of certain stories that he felt was strategic. You see, it just says photos by Stephen Parker, but there's no byline on it. He pulled that off at the last minute. Anyway, I wrote this story, and this is Dick Landy, and this is the Ball Stud Hemi. Now, the Ball Stud Hemi, here's the story behind this thing. Chrysler was producing basically 3 separate big blocks at the time. The low deck, the 383. This is in 1869 when development started on this motor. They were running the low deck, the 383, the 361 also for truck use. They were running the 440 for the bigger cars, performance cars, luxury cars, and the 426 Hemi, which was its own animal. And Chrysler was always struggling, money was always tight, and running 3 separate big block lines, it didn't really make much sense. And the Hemi itself was a thorn in the side of the corporation, because while it was a big prestige motor, it was expensive to produce. The 2 rocker shafts and all of the hand assembly that needed to be done with it. So the decision was made to combine all 3 engine lines for 1972. So the 426 Hemi, the 383 with a low deck motor, and the 440, the tall deck motor, were all going to be combined into one unit, and it was going to be this, the Ball Stud Hemi. Now, to be fair, the Ball Stud Hemi is really Chrysler's version of the big block Chevy. Instead of using the traditional rocker shafts, it uses ball studs, exactly like, and stamped steel rockers, exactly like the big block Chevy. It also has, it's not a true hemispherical combustion chamber. You can see by this picture over here, the valves are canted, and you can see the way the valve springs stick out, very, very reminiscent of the big block Chevy. And it was a design that worked. The Hemi was a stupendous race motor, but not a really happy street motor. It was very lazy. It had lazy ports, lazy combustion chambers at low RPM. Wasn't very happy. So this was the solution. Basically, combine all 3 engines and make a big block Chevy. So it was going to be produced in 2 sizes. The 400 cubic inch, the one that actually went into production, with the dimensions of it at least, 3.34 inch by 3.375 stroke, and then a 444 cube version, which was the same 3.34 inch bore with the 3 3/4 inch stroke crank that the Hemi and the 440 had at that point. But anyway, this thing, the one that, as Landy had it, this was a complete motor. Here you can see some of the odds and ends here. Here's the rockers and the push rods and the guide plates, very Chevrolet-like. Here's the piston rod assembly. Here's the bottom end of the motor. There were no cross bolts, right? Here's a side shot. The engine used a peanut plug, just like the Chevy does. And you can see it has 1972 production breather on it. You can see underneath here, here's the thermoquad. Let's see. This was actually the first use that I know of the thermoquad. This didn't go into production until 2 years later, 3 years later. But this manifold was actually a spread bore manifold intended for use with the thermoquad. Here's the block. You can see they moved the bottom row of cylinder head bolts around just a little bit to clear the exhaust push rods, or the exhaust ports rather. And here are oil drain back holes that they added. The Hemi had them down here in the corners. But anyway, this is this was a complete motor. You know, everything was cast. Everything had its own casting numbers. This thing was like actually ready for production. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this engine here either wasn't installed in a mule at some point, or a dyno motor. But I mean, it's so complete that it's like, you know, this thing's ready to run. And at the time that Landy had it, it was exactly intact. It was exactly as it came from the factory, right? Which is like, when you stop and you think about it, you know, not only is this an engine that was never produced, but you know, it managed to get out with its plug wires intact, with every little thing, every sticker, every hose, everything exactly the way the factory had it. Well, one way or another, the engine changed hands, and it ended up with a guy. I won't even mention his name. It's unimportant. But this fellow decided that, you know what? The Ball Stud Hemi, as it existed, was not quite good enough. So what he did was, he hot rodded the engine. This is like, you know, you can't really believe shit like this can actually happen, okay? So he took this, this rare, this beyond rare, this one-of-a-kind factory prototype engine, okay? And he bored it 30 over. He took the priceless, one-of-a-kind, you know, only one of its kind on Earth casting, and he bored it 30 over, and he fitted it with Bosch 429 pistons because they fit, okay? And then he put a stroker crank in it, you know, because you know what? If you're at a meet or you're at a race and another one-of-a-kind Ball Stud Hemi shows up and it doesn't have a, you know, you want to be able to smoke this guy, right? The factory cam wasn't good enough, so he had a lump cam ground for the thing. He ported the intake manifold, this one-of-a-kind, you know, one-of-a-kind intake manifold, the factory's spread bore, you know, he ported it and modified it to take an 850 Holly, you know, because the thermoquad wasn't good enough. And then of course you can't have, you know, black valve covers. You can't have factory black wrinkle valve covers with factory stickers on them or anything like that. So no, you gotta paint the goddamn things orange and lose that 1972, you know, style air breather and put the plug-in thing. And then of course you can't have a dual snorkel air cleaner the way it came from the factory. This way, this one-of-a-kind, only engine of its kind ever fucking assembled, right, to survive. You can't have its original air cleaner. You gotta make a single 4-barrel Hemi chrome dome and put it on there. And then of course, the factory electronic distributor that was in this engine, which was also a couple of years before its production time. Well, that wasn't good enough, so you have to put a mechanical cat drive distributor in it. So yeah, you know, anyway, there it is. There's the Ball Stud. Here's the Ball Stud Hemi as it existed, as Chrysler engineers did their thing, and Dick Landy cared for it and gave it its place of honor, and then here's the way it exists today, and you can find it in some museum where I'm disgusted. I'm done with this video. It's done. Bye. See you tomorrow.